Out in the Wild West of the 1870s, Black Creek is minding its own business when this huge gang on horseback storms in like they own the whole town. Leading the charge is Henry Delarue, a fearsome figure with a shady past as a colonel who fought the Indians. He jumps off his horse next to the High Sparrow, a real master multitasker named Nathan Keene, who's the mayor, a priest, and even an undertaker. Delarue demands answers since two of his men were found dead nearby. The mayor is practically shaking in his boots, assuring Delarue that none of the townsfolk had anything to do with it. What he doesn't know is that one of the dead guys is actually Delarue's brother, Paul. The gang leader stands over his brother's lifeless body, and no one dares to say a word. Not the mayor, not even Sheriff Malik and his deputies. Delarue finally breaks the silence and tells Sheriff Malik and Mayor Keene that they have until noon to hand over the killer, or he'll take 2 lives as payback. He even goes on and throws in a biblical reference for dramatic effect, a tooth for a tooth. Just to drive the point home, Delarue warns that if the mayor doesn't pick the victims, he'll end up taking 4 lives instead of just 2. Mrs. Borowski, the old lady who owns the local gun store, gets picked along with a poor guy with no legs. Delarue shows just how cold-blooded he is by wasting no time in killing the legless man.
I've never been a burden. I'm innocent. Please help me, please, Father. I don't want to die. I'm innocent, please don't.
While her grandson Wojciech sobs beside her, Mrs. Borowski prays for Delarue's evil soul before he kills her too. But Delarue isn't finished. An old lady and a disabled man are not enough for him. He goes on to kill a third person right in front of his wife, finally quenching his thirst for blood. It's strange how Delarue seems above the law, as even the sheriff tells people to stay calm and not move after Delarue murders someone. Turns out the townsfolk have been paying Delarue's gang on a regular basis, calling it protection. Now he wants to double their payments until the sheriff finds the man who killed his brother, disregarding Mayor Keene's objections like they're nothing. Rewind to the day before, and we can see the killer of Delarue's brother John Jensen waiting at a train station along with his own brother Peter. These two are Danish war vets who crossed the Atlantic to the US 7 years ago, hoping for a fresh start. After all those years of hard times, John is finally about to reunite with his wife and kid. Soon enough, he spots his wife Marie and their son, walking towards him with big smiles. It's funny how the little guy greets him with the only English phrase he knows.
Good day.
John then takes them to meet Peter before they all head home.
Good day.
Peter mentions he's got some business to handle and will be hanging around in the city for a while. Later on, the lovebirds share a tender kiss before hopping into a stagecoach they had reserved earlier, only to find a friendly couple already inside. The woman makes a series of small talks with John, but she's abruptly cut off when she and her husband are replaced by the authorities with 2 rough-looking men. One of these guys is Paul, Delarue's just released from jail brother, who stares a lot. That's when things start to go downhill, sending John down a path where happiness seems far, far away. Later that night, while the gangsters are half asleep and half drunk, John is teaching his son about the local wildlife and making plans to go hunting. Suddenly, Paul decides to get chatty with Marie, offering her a sip of his drink and trying to strike up a conversation. But when Marie turns him down, this seemingly friendly gesture takes a turn towards a more forceful vibe, accompanied by a hint of threat. Since the woman doesn't know the language, John tells her in Danish to play along. But Paul won't quit, comparing Marie's silence to his own wife's, saying she's mute because Indians cut out her tongue. He's being all flirty with Marie, but John's the one jumping in to answer every question, keeping things under control. Things escalate when Paul reaches out for Marie's dress and tries to get physical. John steps in, telling the guy to back off, but then the other gangster pulls out a gun and points it at him. As John's watching his wife get harassed, he whispers in Danish to Marie to bite the dude's ear. In the blink of an eye, John disarms the gangster, and now he's the one with the gun. He rescues his wife, but then makes the dumb move of telling his son to grab the gangster's gun. The little boy gets down to pick up the gun, which of course is the perfect chance for the gangster to capture him, putting a knife right up to his throat. John is told to jump off the stagecoach or his family will be killed. He pauses for a second, trying to say something to Marie, but he's kicked out of the stagecoach and rolls down onto the grassy ground below. John takes off running after the stagecoach, but it quickly vanishes from sight. All he can hear is his wife and son crying in the distance, which only pushes him to keep going. Even though he trips and falls several times, he gets back up every time and keeps moving. His desperate chase comes to a heartbreaking stop when he finds his son's lifeless body on the ground. John collapses to his knees beside him, shaking as he searches for any sign of life. Tears stream down his face as he holds his son close, eventually getting up and walking away. As John walks along the road, he spots the stagecoach stopped ahead. He lays his son's body next to what looks like the coachman's corpse. He grabs the dead man's gun and starts walking over to the stagecoach. Relying on his past experience, He fires a shot that startles the horses and then takes aim at the gangsters. With pinpoint accuracy, he quickly takes down one of them and then goes after Paul, who's trying to run away. He desperately claims he's innocent of killing John's wife and son, but John's not interested in talking anymore. Fueled by rage, he keeps firing at Paul until the gun runs out of bullets. As he gathers up his family's bodies, he looks calm on the outside, but inside he's drowning in shock and grief. The morning kicks off when his brother shows up, noticing some strange horses outside. Peter tries to comfort John before starting to dig graves for his loved ones. On the same day, the Jensen brothers pack up to head west. They're known as the only decent shooters around, which makes folks suspicious about their involvement in Delarue's brother's death. When they get to Black Creek, someone in town quickly rats them out to the sheriff. Unbeknownst to that, John tries to sell their land to Mayor Keene, but the High Sparrow tries to rip him off, offering only half of what John paid for it 6 years ago.
I couldn't possibly give you more than 145.
Keene goes on and explains that the murder of Delarue's brother the previous night in a stagecoach led to Delarue raising his fees and causing land prices to drop. It's only now that he realizes that he's killed Delarue's brother. With no better choice, he sells the house for way less than it's worth and stashes the cash in his boot, as Keene suggests, to keep it safe. As John gets on his horse to leave, a bunch of guys with guns come up on him from every which way, eventually halting him and taking him into custody after the sheriff shoots his horse. Later, we can see Delarue and his money handler Madeline, the mute widower of Paul, who's often referred to as Princess. They are joined by ambassadors of the Standard Atlantic Oil Company, who hand over a ton of cash to Delarue, but also warn him about his rough tactics with the townsfolk. They explain that they had to cut out Black Creek's connection with the federal government, so Sheriff Malik cannot ask for help. Now we can see that their end goal is to have all Black Creek bought up since it's rich in crude oil. That's why they're using Delarue as a front for their plans. Soon after, Peter is taken into custody as well, although he seems to have fought hard and given a few deputies a good punching session during his arrest. Sheriff Malik has a heart-to-heart conversation with John later, telling him how Delarue used to be a good person before the war with the Indians changed him. He tells John he has to turn him in and how his death will buy them some time until the federal government's help he wired for arrives.
I'm just a shepherd guarding his flock. Sometimes you gotta sacrifice a single sheep to save the rest.
The next morning, the sheriff hands John over to Delarue's men. After giving him a taste of knuckle pie, they tie him to a wooden pole near Delarue's headquarters. When Delarue and Madeline come over, John tells the latter that her beloved husband killed his son and raped his wife, but Delarue cuts him off with a heavy punch. It seems Delarue plans to leave John out in the sun to die of dehydration. As the sun beats down on John and vultures circle above waiting to feast on his body, suddenly Mayor Keene shows up. But instead of helping, he takes John's money and boots, then joins Delarue and calls him by his first name like they're friends. Meanwhile, with Sheriff Malik gone to church, Peter is planning to escape from his cell to join his brother. Peter proves to be craftier than John by attempting to manipulate the deputy guarding him. He tries to infuriate him with his words to get him closer to his cell.
Got you pretty good, didn't I? I mean, you were ugly before I knocked out your teeth. Now you don't just sound like a sick mule, you look like one too.
Shut up.
I'm sure your mother sounded like a mule when you were conceived.
Peter's plan works when he brings the deputy's mother into this, eventually knocking the man out and making his escape. The next scene shows that Delarue isn't that upset about his brother's death. With Paul gone, Delarue now sees his brother's mute widow as his own. He's in bed with the princess, who clearly doesn't want to be there. Her bloody nose and black eyes say it all. He then promises to make her the Queen of New Orleans, something she doesn't look happy about. Next, we see John struggling in the rain, but he's not going to be alone for long because Peter shows up. He silently takes down 2 gang members, unties John, and then shoots another pair to clear their escape path. This, of course, alarms Delarue and his men. They quickly start chasing the brothers on horseback. Having put up with the bad weather for so long, John cannot hold on to his horse, falling on the ground. This forces Peter to come up with a new plan. He hides John behind a big rock to keep him safe and uses himself as a decoy to split up Delarue's men. The next day, John wakes up so thirsty that he rushes to drink from the first dirty water he finds. As he hears Delarue's men approaching, he quickly looks for a place to hide. What he sees next breaks him completely. A gang member is dragging Peter's body behind a horse. With the last member of his family gone, John's face shows pure desperation and trauma. When Delarue gets back to his territory, he sees some of his men dead on the ground. Madeline is nowhere to be found, and the safe is empty. It's clear she took all the oil money and ran away. Madeline is now at the train station with a bag full of money slung over her shoulder, ready to hop on the next train. She's nervous, eyeing everyone around her suspiciously, and only relaxes a bit when the train finally starts moving. She breathes a sigh of relief, but it doesn't last long. Delarue's men show up and try to stop the train. Panicking, Madeline moves quickly from one car to another, desperately searching for a way out. But it's no use, and she finally gets caught. Brought before Delarue, he gives her a hard slap and she spits right back at him. Delarue wants to kill her on the spot, but his right-hand man suggests she can be put to good use. That's why he decides to delay her execution.
Once you've all had your way with her, cut her throat.
As John wanders through the desolate lands near Black Creek, he comes across a well. But then he's met by the gun-wielding, angry landowner, Mrs. Whistler. She fires warning shots, but John is really thirsty. He pays no mind and keeps moving towards the well. Little does he know the well is filled with crude oil. Recognizing John, Mrs. Whistler lowers her gun and provides him with shelter, some bread and water to drink. She's the widow of Delarue's third victim, whom he killed early in the movie. Now dealing with tough living conditions and the loss of her husband, she has decided to leave the place and invites John to join her, warning that Delarue will surely kill him too. However, John seems to have a strong reason to stay. Later that night, John heads to the mayor's house with a gun pointed to his head. The trembling old man quickly hands back John's boots and money, but that's not all John is after. As he questions the mayor, John finds out that the man also bought Mrs. Whistler's land, though it's not clear where the deeds for her and John's properties are. When John asks about his connection with Delarue, the mayor tries to lie his way out. But after John butt-strokes him and forces him into a coffin, the mayor finally admits the truth. He confesses that he hands over the land deeds to Delarue, who is buying up properties to eventually own the whole town. After that, John goes to Mrs. Borowski's old store, now run by her young grandson, to pick up some ammunition and flammable liquids. While he's there, he tells Wojciech to inform the sheriff about the shady dealings of Mayor Keene and Delarue. When Wojciech learns that John plans to face Delarue's gang all by himself, he sees a chance to get revenge for his grandmother's death and insists on joining him. The next morning, John cleverly uses 3 decoys. First is the coffin with Keene's dead body to draw the enemy's attention. Delarue himself opens the coffin and orders his men to burn it. Meanwhile, Wojciech starts a bonfire nearby to further distract Delarue's men. At just the right moment, Wojciech starts shooting even though he's shaky and nervous. Then the gang realizes the stable is on fire too. While Delarue's men are busy trying to save the trapped horses, John picks them off one by one from his well-hidden spot. Proving himself useful, Wojciech decides to sneak up to a building's rooftop to have a vantage point, carrying a bottle of flammables. Little does he know that the ceiling creaks, giving away his position to a gang member who's puffing on a cigarette. The gangster follows the sound, making his way upstairs to the very room where Madeline is tied up by Delarue's right-hand man. As Wojciech shoots and injures a gang member, the thug in the same building opens fire at the ceiling and manages to kill the kid as we hear his scream and the shattering of glass. Just as the thug is feeling like a boss, the flammable liquid leaks through the ceiling onto his cigarette, setting him on fire and eventually causing the whole place to burn down. While John barely has a moment to process Wojciech's death, he spots the thug dragging Madeline out of the fiery building. With razor-sharp focus, John takes a shot and hits the thug in the leg, causing the guy to tumble off the edge. Just as he finishes off the thug, another gang member figures out where John is hiding thanks to the gunshots and starts shooting blindly at the wall. John now plays a game of cat and mouse with his next target, hiding in the crawl space under the floor. The gang member spots John's gun barrel and starts blasting the floor, hoping to hit him, but he walks right into a trap when he tries to peek through the tile cracks. John stabs him in the eye, eventually catching him and brutally slitting his throat. But then John makes a huge mistake by staying out in the open, forgetting all about Delarue. And of course, Delarue doesn't miss his chance, landing a shot that knocks John to the ground. It looks like he's lost the fight, though Delarue admits he underestimated him. Just when things seem bleak, John's savior appears out of nowhere. It's Madeline, who shoots Delarue twice without hesitation, and in the end, it's John who finishes the man off with a fatal shot to the head. After that, John and Madeline find themselves pointing guns at each other, but they soon come to realize that they're not the real enemies here. Soon enough, Malik and his crew roll into the scene, giving John props for saving the town from Delarue's terror. But when Madeline shows up, the sheriff instantly goes on high alert, ready for trouble. That's when John steps in and declares that she's under his protection. Both have their weapons ready, making it clear to the sheriff that he better back off. Once the sheriff and his men are gone, the quiet man and the mute woman embark on a fresh journey. It's probably going to be filled with a lot of awkward silences, but who knows? Maybe things will work out and these two become a happy, quiet couple after all.